All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So everybody take your seats. Let's make sure you're all in the right room. So this is session CDB 341, Microsoft User Experience Virtualization, Enhancing User State Virtualization through MDOP. My name is AJ Smith. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager for User Experience Virtualization. And co-presenting with me today is Britton Zerker, one of our program managers on the UEV team. And today, our goal in the next hour and 15 minutes is to kind of give you a good overview of what user experience virtualization is all about, show you a bit more than maybe what you saw in the keynote, because the keynote gave you the super high level of what the product can do. We're going to go much deeper into it and show you kind of some of the technical weeds of the actual product here. But first things first. UEV, or User Experience Virtualization, is a product that is under active development. We've only just released the beta just a few weeks ago. So the stuff I talk about today may change as we get closer to release. So especially if you're watching this on the recording, please keep this in mind that if you're watching this a month or two from now, if something's changed from the slide standpoint and the product's changed a little bit, they may not be in sync. So just keep that in mind while we're actually going through this. But dates and capabilities are all subject to change. So before we dive directly into UEV, I want to spend just a quick minute level setting, because one of the questions that we get is, well, Microsoft, you guys came out with this thing. Like, this is great. What was the thinking behind it? Like, what kind of drove you to do this? And some of the things that we heard from you guys in particular was that your users were coming to you over the past year or two saying, well, you know what? I need IT to do this to help me be productive. I've got a unique work style. I want to work the way that I want to work. And IT, you should help me be able to be as productive as I can by letting me work the way exactly how I want to work. Also, I've got multiple devices. I want to be able to use many devices to access my corporate information and even my personal stuff. And maybe it's you as IT are even giving out the devices. Here's your laptop, here's a virtual machine, here's another device that you can use, and the end users also bring in their own. So now they've got all these devices and they're like, make this stuff work. Give me what I want so that I can be productive and do exactly how I can do my job and be productive. Also, most of these devices are mobile devices, right? So people are carrying around laptops, slate devices, phones. So people are just more and more mobile in general. And we especially see that from a laptop purchase standpoint, where we see more laptops being sold than desktops. So we're seeing more and more mobility, more and more devices. And what we're hearing from you guys is the fact that to kind of meet some of these demands, you're looking at desktop virtualization to solve some of this. And when I say desktop virtualization, I don't just mean VDI. I mean things like application virtualization, remote app, things like that. And as you guys are looking at some of that stuff, what we've been hearing is that, you know what? The user's experience, their settings, their data, be it the Word documents they create, the PDF files, those legal contracts, architectural design files, are really, really important, especially when I start roaming from device to device or accessing a virtual machine and a physical machine. And what we're hearing from you guys is that the traditional approaches that you've seen from Microsoft really don't meet today's needs around a consistent user experience across multiple devices. So that's what we really kind of went in with User Experience Virtualization, or UEV. So let's talk a little bit about how UEV kind of brings us to the table and how things have been done in the past. So first, what we found in the past was that most machines were configured similarly, right? So if you look at an organization or a department, let's say take the accounting department, the accounting guys always had the exact same setup across all the PCs. So all the PCs has every single accounting app, even though if Britton only used app A and I never used it, my machine still had application A. So you deployed all this stuff through MSI. Every machine had the MSIs deployed down to it. And then what happened is that a user would log into the machine, and they'd get their OS, and they'd get their applications. And then to customize it, they would manually go in and move toolbars around and made it look just the way they wanted to. Great. When they were done with that, they logged off the machine. And then when they went to another box, what ended up happening, they saw, of course, the exact same OS experience, and they saw the same application, but then they reconfigured everything, because most organizations didn't have a way to roam that experience information around. Now, I know some of you have probably used roaming your profiles or other traditional technologies that help you roam around. So you had this server that held all this experience information. You still deployed applications through MSIs, right? So you made all the machines still the same through MSIs. But when you logged in, the experience information came down from that central server, and you had exactly what the user was looking for. And if they made a change to, let's say, Word, that change would only be synced on log off. It would go back up to that central location, And then when they logged into the other machine, they got the experience that they were expecting. That change came down on that brand new box. Now, today, things have really changed. First and foremost, we're not just seeing desktops. We're seeing laptops, slate devices, virtual machines. So you have a different set of basically machines or different sets of Windows environments that you're using to move the experience around to. And also, you're not just using MSI files anymore. You're using AppV, you're using remote app to deliver applications out to those machines. So what UEV really brings to the table is that I can bring down the experience for all these machines really simply and easily. And if I make a change to one of the applications or to the OS, I can move that experience around to these other instances of Windows or the applications without always having to log in and log off. So I can make my changes in Word, close out of Word, and then go to another machine and have Word with the exact same experience. So the benefits of user experience virtualization, or UEV as we call it, is first, the app experience can roam regardless of how the app is deployed. So UEV does not care that the application is deployed through an MSI file or AppV or delivered through remote app. It knows that you're running Word 2010. It looks at, you're running Word 2010 here? Great, I apply the experience on this machine. You go to another machine, it's Word 2010, great, I'll apply it there also. You can also target just the apps that you want to roam the experience for. So we want to give IT some control over what actually roams to the corporate environment. Is there maybe some applications you don't care about the experience for? A good example is if your users have admin rights, maybe they're installing games, right? I don't really care about their user experience for World of Warcraft. You probably don't need that in your corporate environment. So why actually roam the experience for that application? We also have very little infrastructure required to get UEV up and running, and it integrates with our desktop virtualization technologies. So it integrates with AppV, remote app, VDI, all of that. And we're going to dive into this a lot deeper as we go through the slides. But if I had to boil down user experience virtualization into a quick statement, it's about changing the device and keeping your experience. And from an end user standpoint, it's all about getting them a consistent personal Windows experience that matches their unique work style. Just like many of us, we like to work in different locations where we're productive. Some people like to work in their corporate office. Some people like to work at home in their home office. Britton works out of a branch office for Microsoft. Some people like to work out of coffee shops. But the location is only part of it. Some of it is also like, Britton probably likes his settings in Word completely different than how I like mine. And that experience is really important to helping people be productive. From an IT standpoint, we want to help you enable this user-defined personal experience across many devices, but maintain that oversight. So give you control of what applications should have the experience roam and which ones you shouldn't even worry about. And lastly, it's got to easily scale and be managed with familiar tools. You should not have to go out and learn a whole new tool set, a whole new management console to work with UEV. We're going to leverage what you already have in your organization, so you don't have to really learn anything new. So let's talk about some of the capabilities. We're really going to focus on three major areas. First, personal and flexible for the end user, simple and versatile for you as the IT professional, and integrated and scalable for your infrastructure. So on the personal flexible side, it's really one of the pieces we focus on is retaining your experience, right? So from an end user standpoint, my experience should be wherever I go, right? From one device to another, be it a physical machine, a VDI instance, an RDS session-based desktop, or even my home PC if I'm using like an RDS connection back to the corporate network, right? This is a good example is let's say you have an accountant, right? An accountant in the organization has got a typical desktop. He sits in his office all day. He does what he needs to do. He very rarely travels. But occasionally, he works from home. And at home, since he doesn't have a laptop, you give him access to the RDS gateway. He goes in there, opens up his applications, and he gets the exact same experience. So basically, again, we can take the experience from one machine, roam that to all the other machines that this person could actually use, including that home RDS connection that somebody's actually using. So the end user doesn't have to reconfigure their OS and application settings anymore as they go from machine to machine. Or they get a brand new machine, right? Sometimes, hey, Britton gets a brand new box, great. Britton logs into it, he gets the exact same experience that he had before on his previous machine.
Hey, so AJ, let me interrupt you. How many of you have seen the demonstration for the user disk in Windows Server 2012? Does anyone know about that technology? Not many hands. Okay, there are some demos, and I think you can go to the booths and get more information. But in a nutshell, user disk is a feature that will ship in Windows Server 2012. Formerly, it was codenamed Windows Server version 8. but it's officially called Windows Server 2012. And that's a feature that will allow you to set up your pooled VDI instance to roam the user's state, their files, their data, their settings, amongst the pooled VDI. Now, how is that different than what we're providing here? Well, there's a better together scenario. Because the user disk is confined to a pool of VDI sessions and VDI only, you can deploy UEV and you can allow those settings to roam amongst pools. And then, of course, as AJ's described, you can also have those user settings available for other deliveries, be it rich desktop, be it remote app, et cetera. So there's a better together story. I urge you to go find out more information about user disk. Remember that there is a better together story with UEV and user disk. You've got a great solution for your pooled VDI.
Yep. So UEV works across physical and deployment methods. I mean, we don't care if it's an RDS version of, delivered version of Word or another application. It works across physical and virtual. So it's great that we actually have this story with the RDS team around user disk, because again, it roams outside the pool. Plus, you get to choose what you want to roam, because in the RDS, with user disk, it's going to take everything. So. Also, one of the things that we focus on is being able to operate in an offline mode. So again, people are mobile, they have laptops. You should be able to get that experience when you're not connected to the corporate network. So what we do is we actually cache the actual experience information on the machine using technology you're probably already familiar with, offline files. So we leverage that technology that's built into Windows to cache the actual experience information. So when you're disconnected, we just go to the local cache, bring the experience in, you've got it. If you make any changes, we store that locally in that same cache. And when you get network connectivity back to the corporate network, we push it right back up.
So AJ, in the vein of offline files, let me talk about another point with UEV. UEV is a settings solution only. It does not handle user data. And user data would be defined as content that users create, that they manipulate, like Word documents, like PDFs, like video editing, et cetera. We have technologies for data, like folder redirection. Folder redirection, many of you know, it's the known folders. It allows you to roam data for your users. It also uses an offline experience, the same thing, offline folders, also known as client-side cache. UEV works better with a data composition solution like folder redirection. If you have data centralization a la SharePoint or some other solution, it'll work well as well. And we'll talk a little bit more when we get into demos. Just keep in mind, user data is handled by other solutions within Microsoft, folder redirection being the one that we recommend. So we recommend a better story with UEV and a solution like folder redirection.
Yep. Thanks, Brad. Another thing we put a lot of focus on was login and synchronization. Because first of all, how many of you are familiar with roam user profiles? By show of hands. Okay. Well, a lot of you. Okay. How many of you have heard this story from your end users? I log in, I wait 3 minutes, and I get my desktop. Okay, yeah, okay, many hands. Okay, yeah, I go get a cup of coffee, I come back, and the machine's ready for me. Right? That was one thing that we really wanted to avoid with user experience virtualization. And the way that we did this is that we basically determined, how do we build smart policies that really focus on the experience synchronization story. So let me talk to you briefly about how this works. When a user logs into a machine that's running that's running UEV, they get their OS, and when they log in, they get the OS experience information right away. So we just load the OS piece when they log into the machine. We don't load anything else. So all we're giving you is what you need to get to that desktop. But then when you load up an application, let's say IE, at that point in time, we load the experience information just for IE. So whatever your favorites are, what zoom level you had, things like that are all loaded when the application actually loads up. And then let's say you open up Word, and this, say Word is delivered through AppV. In this case, we do the exact same thing. Word loads, we inject in the actual settings information. We're great. It looks exactly the way I want it to. For apps, though, when I close out of the app, I take the experience information and push it right up to the UEV settings storage location. So I'm not syncing app settings on login and log off, unlike some of our traditional roaming technologies. This is done on app open and app closes when we inject and pull things out. On the OS side, what we focus on is, first of all, you can do login and log off, but we also have the ability to do it on lock. So when you lock your PC and unlock it, we have triggers there that we can use to inject in OS settings when we actually have the ability just to unlock that box and go in. We also have the ability to use an RDS connection or a disconnect. So if you're on an RDS machine or an RDS VM, you disconnect, you go to another one, well, great. We'll pull out the settings at that point in time for the OS, inject in the ones that are appropriate on that next RDS session. So instead of us talking about this, why don't we kind of show them what the user experience actually looks like?
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Let's show this stuff here. So
okay, so we've got about 45 minutes left, and this time we're going to be pretty demo heavy. We're going to go through the user experience now so you can kind of see it from the end user's perspective. Then we're going to jump into what are called settings location templates. We'll talk all about those and the role it plays as you deploy UEV, and then we'll talk a little bit about deployment requirements. So we'll try to end with plenty of time for questions, and also let you guys get out to lunch as soon as possible.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump over here to our demo machine. We'll let this warm up. All right, so I've got an environment here. You can see I have two very similarly configured Windows 7 VMs, and they're all logged in as the same user. So we're kind of contriving an environment here where I, the user, have potentially a rich desktop, maybe a VDI. There's also a remote app server there, so I've got access to my apps via remote app as well. And there's a domain controller kind of tying things together. So we'll just kind of show you some of the environment here. AJ, I'm going to go up and pull up the domain controller.
Yeah, let's first of all, this is no smoke and mirrors. So we're going to show you behind the scenes Active Directory, make sure that there's no roaming profiles turned on. So no smoke and mirrors. All this is going to be done through user experience virtualization.
All right, so I'm going to pull up the AD panel for users and computers so I can get my profile. Make sure I got that one. Sorry for the VMs here. Okay, so you can see the panel. I'm already drilled down into the production group. That's where my user resides. You can see my name here. So I'm going to pull that up here. Very standard profile.
Yep. So
what would you like to see?
Let's go to the Profiles tab. That's
okay.
The first place we got to look. No profile path set up. There is a home drive mapped, and we'll explain that a little bit later as an option here. So we've got a P drive mapped as a home share, which is good. And then let's also look at the RDS profile. Nothing there.
Okay. So there you've got it. So we've got just a pure UAV environment for the user settings. All right, so let's start with something easy. You guys saw the keynote today with Brad. He had the picture of his family. It roamed over to his VDI session from his laptop. Let's go ahead and show the audience that again in case any of you missed it. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this machine.
And the reason we're locking is, of course, because we want to show you that on unlock, the actual experience roams over here. So we'll do it on the first machine here.
We got the standard Windows 7 flag logo. So let's pick something. AJ, what's your favorite out of these?
Which one? I'll take nature.
All right, he's from Seattle. He likes nature. Let's pick that one. We'll let that guy apply. And then I'm going to go ahead. The triggers that AJ talked about, one of the ones we're using here again is locking the computer. I don't need to log off on this one, although that is an additional trigger as well.
It's locked, yep.
Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and unlock this guy. You can see right away, changes to our nature machine, and I've got that seamless experience. It looks familiar. Let's talk about something now, AJ, a little more important. We know that we can target OS settings, and those can be high value to user, but higher value, I think, are applications, the things that make me productive, the things that allow me to get my job done. And what's the #1 productivity app in Windows that we all use across the organization? It's Office. Okay, so we have Office support, Office 2010 support out of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock the second machine here. Okay, now let's talk about how this machine's configured. So we talked about, we also have a sister product, AppV, who's releasing their 5.0 version. It's in beta along with UEV 1.0. We're really excited about it. We talked about how you can roam amongst all kinds of application deliveries. So on this machine, we're going to go ahead and launch Word, but it's going to be AppV 5. So if I hover over that, you can see the tooltip there. You can see that this is an AppV 5 version of Word. I'm going to go ahead and launch it.
Go ahead and launch this.
And up it comes. And what's the first thing that happens when you're on a fresh machine and you run Office?
You put in your name and your initials. You guys have probably seen this before. You log into a box like, all right, I got to type this in. Let me put my right name in.
Make a little change. I want to be a little more distinct here. I'm going to put my middle initial. So I'm going to save that out. Okay, now another great thing, since Office 2007 is the ribbon. And users like to customize that. They like to find the tools that are available to them. So let's go in and customize my ribbon, AJ. So I'm going to go back to the Backstage panel, to the options. And we're going to go to Customize Ribbon. Now, mailings. When's the last time I sent a letter at work? I can't remember.
Do you do a lot of mail merges?
I don't do a lot of that.
As an engineer, I don't think you do
Christmas
a lot of
list at home, maybe, but at work, never. So I'm going to get rid of the mailings tab. I don't use it. I am an engineer. I work with the engineering team a lot, and some of these tools are helpful in Word, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. Now, another great feature some users may not be aware of is you can add your own groups of tabs and have those display right on there.
So let's do a new tab.
Let's do a new tab. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this to Brits tab. And we'll go ahead and put some of my favorite tools in here. All right, so I'm going to add bullets. You've read my documents.
You are the bullet man. There's more bullets, I think, sometimes than words. But
okay. What's another tool you'd like to see on the bar?
Let's do spelling and grammar.
Spelling and grammar. What are you saying about my documents here, AJ?
Your grammar's bad, but I can't really complain because
Okay.
I'm just as bad. I was that C student in spelling in elementary school. So
All right,
check
just
is
for
my
you,
best friend.
I'll add that
Yeah.
one. All right. So let's do one other customization here. The toolbar in the upper left-hand corner, the icons that you see in Word.
The quick access toolbar. Yep.
Quick access toolbar. So let's go there. Save, undo, redo is the default. What do you want to see there?
Let's add in find.
Okay, fine.
Let's make that easy.
It's a good command. So we're going to add the find. Now that will show up in our upper thing. Now let me do one more thing. So we talked about how great it is to have centralized data or data roaming solution for UEV. In this case, you saw in the Active Directory, I have a user profile. Every time I log into my machines, that P drive mounts, and I should have access to all of my data. So I'm going to go ahead and change the default file location for my documents to that P drive. And we'll assume the P drive is backed up for me. It's going to be available wherever I log into my Windows machines when I'm on a domain join machine. And there we have it. And one other thing, I don't like going 10 minutes on the auto recover, the auto save feature. I'm going to go down to 5, just in case.
Perfect.
And I'll go ahead and I'll save these out. And right away you can see we got rid of the mailings tab, developer tab's there. Here's Brit's tab with the bullets, spelling and grammar. And you can see the find item in the toolbar in the upper left-hand corner.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a document here. Hello, MMS. MMS loves UEV. And right now we're demonstrating, use my bullets here, UEV works with AppV 5.0 beta. Okay, and I'll go ahead and I'll save this. It's my P drive because I made that change, and we'll save that document. All right, now I'm going to close this out. All right, where do we want to see this? So we showed the Windows 7 experience.
Well, we show Windows 8, and on the Windows 8 machine we have, all we have is a physical instance of Office. So it's not virtualized with AppV. It's just the standard MSI you would install right off the disk.
Yep.
So we'll just load up.
Load WordPad.
No,
Wrong one.
Not WordPad. Let's try WordPad.
Not quite as rich there. So we'll do Word, and this is an MSI version of Word. And right away, you didn't see the prompt for my username and my initials. You can see there's my specialized tab. Developer tab's there. Mailings is gone. I've got my Find button.
Yep.
Let's take a look at the backstage here. And there it is. There's my recently accessed document on my P drive, the one I just created. We'll go ahead and we'll pull that up. And now we're going to say UEV works with Windows 8 Consumer Preview. All right. And we notice we've got the Find option up there. I think I mentioned that. I'm going to save this guy. Let's go back and look at the options here and look at my save time. Show that save is 5 minutes, and there's my P drive.
Perfect.
So there we have it.
Yep.
On Windows 8, we saw AppV 5, we saw MSI. It also works well with AppV 4.6, which we're not going to demo here for interest of time.
Okay. Well, let's make one more change.
Okay.
We need to make one more. Let's change your initials because we need
Okay.
to show them the RDS side of this.
Yeah.
So again,
I don't know how many BZs there are on Microsoft, but I'll go ahead and I'll get rid of my middle initial.
Sure.
There's probably not many.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll close our document. And again, that's our trigger to save those settings back out, open and closing those documents, and get rid of Windows 8 here. And what are we going to show over here?
So on the desktop, we've got an icon for Remote App. So we're actually going to just take Word 2010 from a Windows Server 2008 R2 box that we've got behind the scenes here and just load up Word through here. So this is a physical instance of Office on the RDS box, and we're
here.
up and running.
So there it is. You can see it's a remote displayed remote app version of Office, same version. I've got my tabs, everything you want. I won't bore you with those details. You saw they roamed. I'm going to go to my backstage. There's my recent document. And we're going to say UEV works with remote app. And there we have it. Let's save this guy. All right, so now we've demonstrated themes. We showed that we can do OS settings. We demonstrated very important suite of applications, Office 2010. Now let's talk about a third-party app.
Yeah.
One that doesn't ship with our product. And we'll get to in a moment how you actually extend support of UEV to the applications and LOBs that you have in your organization. So in this case, we've got Adobe Reader.
Yeah.
And we've already created the template for that one that's actually on these machines. We'll go over in detail how you actually create those. We'll do a demonstration of that later. But we've already got this one baked. It's in there, ready to go.
Yep.
All right.
Load up Acrobat Reader. 10.
What's special about this one? This is not a special one. This is just standard MSI.
Let's take a look.
See the splash screen. I've got to accept the EULA. And I'm going to open a document. And I'm going to go to my P drive. All right, there's a great document here on total cost of ownership of MDOP by IDC. It's a favorite of AJ's here. A little light reading for you guys.
Okay. MDOP TCO.
All right, so I'm going to make a couple of changes here just to prove the ROM. Go down to the preferences pane of Adobe Reader. And the first thing I'm going to do on this little tiny resolution, the automatic doesn't work so well. So I'm just going to go down to...
Bump it up.
I'm just going to go down to 100%.
All right,
Make sure it
right.
always has 100%.
All right.
Brad did 200%. I'm a little bit younger than Brad.
All right.
My eyes aren't quite so bad.
You know it's being recorded, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'm going to go into the full screen here, and I'm going to turn on the accelerators. Okay. I'm going to go to Documents, just a Restore Last View. Anything else you want to see?
I think it's in pretty good shape.
Okay. So let's close this guy down. One more thing.
Actually, we need to hit OK to that.
Yeah,
right?
we need to hit that OK.
Yep. Gotta scroll down here.
Thanks for saving me on that one, AJ. Yeah. Okay. So we save the preferences. It's at 100%. This is 784. This is the preference for the document. We'll see that the default preference is saved when we roam. So I'm going to close this guy out. It's our trigger. It's going to save that package out. I don't have to log out. I don't have to lock it. Applications will just roam. Now, what's special about this guy? Look there again. It's our friend AppV 5.0 beta. We're just going to show once again the settings we're on amongst those. And here in my recently used documents on my P drive is our total cost of ownership of MDOP, AJ's favorite document. And we look into the settings. And you can see the zoom was set to 100%. I got single key accelerators. And then finally, restore last few settings from open documents. So there you have it.
Moved over. Yep, perfect.
OK. So let's jump back over to the deck.
Let's go over to the deck here.
So there you have the user experience. So let's talk about the simple and versatile pillar. And this gets into how UEV actually works. And we'll take a look at this. So we know that with UEV, you've got the ultimate choice in what it is you decide to roam. We don't just take the entire profile. We let you target applications, let you target OS settings, really tailor it for your organization. So how does that work? We've talked a little bit about this. Settings location templates are the magic. And these are simply XML-based files that define what application or OS settings grouping you're targeting and where the locations of those settings reside. Like I said, it's XML-based. Here's a brief overview of what it contains. We're going to get more into the weeds here if you're an XML geek. But it essentially identifies the application, gives it a unique ID that we use to store the settings in a package. It identifies the executable, so it's targeting the actual runtime executable of the application that you want. And then, of course, the magic, it lets you specify the locations of where those should roam. So how can you get the templates for your organization? There's three ways that happens. The first is what we, Microsoft, test and provide out of the box. And we are working right now to finalize that list. We'll talk about what's in beta in a moment. The second part is the ones that you create. So, of course, we can't create every template in the world. You have LOBs that we don't have access to. You need to be able to customize it. We have some great ways that you're going to be able to do that. We'll talk about it in a moment. And then finally, community shared. So we already started a community. You may be familiar with AppV. They have what are called package accelerators that help you sequence applications more quickly. We're in the same site that you can get package accelerators. There's now a UEV site, and AJ is going to give us a little bit overview of that in a moment. But you can share, you can contribute, and you can bring back some of what your colleagues provide as far as UEV templates. So let's move on to what's provided out of the box. Again, this is a list we're trying to refine to make it as easy as possible for you to bootstrap your UEV deployment. So in beta, what we have right now is the Office 2010 suite. We have browser options, i.e. 9 and 10. We have Windows accessories, and we have the themes, which you saw roam, and then we have ease of access, the accessibility in Windows 7.
Yeah, so I'd say if this is a short list, we understand. We'd love to see your guys' feedback on what else you would like to see. So recommend, first of all, go get the beta. On the beta site, on Connect, there's a feedback form. Fill it out. If you guys say, hey, I really need this thing, I think you really should focus on this app too, let us know, because we want to hear that feedback and hear what you guys want to see also.
Absolutely. So that's great. Everyone should take a look at the beta. You will have links in this deck. You should have seen little cards on your breakfast table today. Maybe you grabbed one. On one side's the AppV beta, the other side's us. Go take a look at it. OK, so let's talk about IT-created templates. Easiest way, if you're not familiar with it, you're not comfortable in the command line, you're not comfortable with XML, or you just want to get up quickly, we have a wizard, a utility we call the UEV generator. And the UEV generator is a wizard-based interface, allows you to point it to an executable, run that executable, and discover automatically, without having to understand where those settings are located. It will give you a pretty good template, one that, for the most part, is going to roam what you'd like. We also have some advanced features in the generator we'll get to in a moment that allows you to refine those. If the generator didn't quite work the way you expected, you want to add or remove some settings. There's some flows to allow you to do some advanced things if you understand where those application settings should be. So we'll talk about that and demonstrate that in a moment. What about you XML geeks, the ones that really want to get down into the weeds? So this is a published format. You can get the XML schema in the actual UEV bits. And the final product will have some documentation on this as well. But let's just give you a brief overview. I hope you can view this okay in the back. I'm going to highlight the boxes I talk about so you can get a little better overview. So the first group that I have here is identifying your application. This is the common name of the application. And then there is a string, the ID. The ID, again, needs to be unique for that application because it's what's going to be used to create the settings package for your users. So you don't want to have conflicts. That needs to be a unique ID. You can use a GUID. It could be anything that you decide to call it. Let's go down to the next version. So if you've ever right-click on an executable in Windows and go to Properties, you're going to see this information. It tells you exactly the name of the executable. It tells you the common name of the executable. This part needs to match the application you're targeting. So you need to be careful about how you define this. Again, if you use the generator, it's going to do all of this for you automatically. This would be if you're actually going to go out and do it yourself. A little bit further down, you'll see it's identifying the version. This one is targeting 10.1 and 10.0, so there is version spanning. If you know that settings package is going to work across versions, you can span versions in the UEV templates. And then we're going to go to the next stop. This is the magic. This is where you actually define where the settings reside. Now you notice here's the section for registry. We're taking two paths, and both of those paths, we're taking everything under those paths. So it's recursive. That'll take all folders and registry locations under that path. You can also do wildcard matching. You can actually define right down to a file. There's a lot of flexibility and versatility. One thing you'll notice here, we don't talk about which hive this is in. UEV supports in the registry only HKey current user. So most of the settings are the settings that we have determined that you would want to roam. They're designed to be in HKey current user. If you have applications where that's not the case, in beta, we'd love to hear your feedback. If there are areas outside of the registry where you think settings should roam, we'd love to hear that. But in beta, you'll notice that it only, for registry, it only supports HKey current user. Files is different. On the other hand, you notice here that I've got an environment variable appdata, %, which is, of course, the appdata roaming location. This is where you'll typically find files or settings files. This is where they're stored. For files, we're not confined to appdata roaming. You can specify anywhere that user can read and write. You can pull files. We find that there are applications that have settings that are stored outside of the typical roaming locations. And so you'll notice that we do support environment variables. There's other variables that you can use. We'll talk a little bit more about some advanced ones in a moment. And then finally, just like registry, you can set recursive paths. You can set wildcard matching. And you can also just specify files directly. That's kind of an overview on the geeky side of it. Yep. Let's actually, one more thing, the last option.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about the shared template side? So we've talked about what's in the box, what you can create, but we can save you some time, and maybe there's something that's already been created that you can just go get. So basically what we've done is we've created what we call a settings location template gallery on TechNet. And what we've asked people to do is, if you create something, why don't you just go ahead and upload it so that other people can take advantage of your work. And you could also go up there and download templates that maybe you want to use. And right now we've got a couple up there. The gallery URL is here that you can just get off the slides. But you can go up there, upload what you actually generate out of the actual generator. Or if you need to go grab something and see, oh, I'm looking for application X. Is there a template for it? Oh, great, there is. Let me just download it and put it in my environment. Now, I know all of you really want to upload, and you're really great people, but some of you are probably going, what's in it for me? Why am I going to upload? Well, we've got a contest running through May 3rd. If you upload content into the actual gallery, you have the chance of winning an unlocked Nokia Windows Phone or an Xbox 360 with Kinect. I've got the official rules, again, on the link on the slides. You can read all the, the actual fine print of everything. But basically, we give you up to 10 entries. You can upload into that gallery, and if you win, hey, you can actually win a great Windows Phone or an Xbox 360 with Kinect. So go ahead, upload. We'd love to see the content, and good luck to you, and hopefully you win.
The engineering team's watching. We've seen some pretty great submissions already, and we're excited how much excitement there is to actually get those up there. Maybe it's the promotion, but we think we've got a pretty good product, and people want to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, again, proof's in the pudding. Why don't we actually show you what it looks like to create and deploy an actual template from
All
scratch?
right, let's do that. We're back to the same environment, but this time we're actually going to show the generator what the IT Pro experience is like to use the generator to create a template and to deploy it. So if you looked at this console, you may have seen it if you've done our hands-on lab. You may have seen this if you've stopped by the desktop virtualization MDOP booth. They may have showed you a quick demo. But here's the, it's very familiar if you've used MDOP tools before. This is the splash screen. It allows you for 3 flows on the left-hand side here. It allows you to create a new template. It allows you to edit one that's existing that you've already created, or maybe you've downloaded it from the gallery. And then the last one is to validate a settings location template. If you want to validate that, the generator checks it out as being valid if you've downloaded it from the gallery or you've imported it from a location that you haven't verified. You can use that flow as well to validate it. The right-hand side, you have some columns to help you kind of navigate some of the help documentation that we have for the product. All right, so let's go in and let's actually create a settings location template here, AJ. All right, so we've got a tool on the system. It's called Design.
So we're gonna create a template for expression design 4, basically.
Yep.
So let's just pull out the executables. That's the.
I've already got it in my recently files, but normally you would browse to the exe location. It supports shortcuts. So if you have a shortcut in your start menu or somewhere else you want to pull it, it'll support that as well. I'm just going to go right to the program files location for designer.exe, and I'll go ahead and open that. The option for command line arguments if I need to do that. I can also change the working folder if my application also needs to support that. Finally, I have the option here to uncheck this and not have the generator discover an application. So if I don't want the generator to do its magic, I know where my settings are, I don't want to go through that trouble, I just want a blank template to start with. Uncheck this box, it'll take you right to the edit flow, and you can start adding your settings manually. So we're not going to do that, we're going to let it do its magic here and see how well it does. Okay, I'm going to elevate here.
So wait, why does it elevate?
It elevates because it's a kernel level monitoring system. It needs to have privileges to be able to run and monitor applications. Although it is monitoring applications, only the user, settings locations, only the user can read and write.
Okay.
All right, so you can see here that it's doing its magic. It's going to wait for me to close this application. For the most part, we've tried to design the generator with technology that will allow you not to have to exercise the application, not to have to go into settings locations and change them. You can, for the most part, start an application, close it, and be okay. There may be some instances, just how the application's write. There's no way we can cover all of the different ways applications can write settings. You may have to go in and exercise and coax it along to discover some of those settings. But we put a tremendous amount of work to make this just a click-through experience for a lot of our IT pros. So in this case, I'm not going to exercise here. It's just waiting for me to close it. So I'm just going to close the application. And then it's created my template already. I click Next. And now we're in the review of the template and the settings that it actually discovered. So we're looking at here. You can see along the top bar there where it says registry in blue, it's got registry and file locations. If you come a bar down, for both registry and files, you see standard and non-standard. So let me define what that is. So standard means we've detected those settings as residing in common roaming locations that are associated with the application. Non-standard, on the other hand, so you can see here it picked up expression and then a hardware location of the registry that design uses. The non-standard locations for the registry are ones that we've detected to be not associated with the application, or they are not useful to roam. In this case, you can see that we picked up some IE settings. The application touched those. And you can see those are unchecked by default. The standard ones are always going to be checked by default. The non-standard one, this will be unchecked. That means they won't be included unless you manually come in and say, hey, you guys detected this. I really need it. I check it. Or if there's a standard one where you don't want it, you can uncheck it here. So I'm just going to stay with the defaults. Okay. I'm just going to jump over here and show that files are exactly the same. You got the standard and non-standard locations. So the standard location, we're in app data roaming. You can take a look at it. This is how you would expect it to be stored. Here we have some cache files in non-standard, and these aren't selected by default. They will not be included in my template unless I include them. Let me show one other little feature of convenience. If you want to actually look where this is, we've got a nice little right-click thing. It'll run regedit, show you the exact location if you want to browse more. Same with the file system. If I click on a file, right-click, it'll pull it up in Explorer, and I can do some discovery that way. So some nice little touches of convenience for you. All right, so let's move on to the edit flow. So now I've verified that I want what it's discovered here. I'm just going to leave them in the defaults, the standard discovers, and I'm going to go next. So I'm in the properties panel. This is our common application name. This is the discovered executable. You can verify those. We recommend you change these usually. Would have discovered the right one, or at least the one you pointed it to. You can see the version. I can do that. It autofills my name and my domain email address. Those can be cleared. If you choose not to use those. Let's talk about editing registry locations. So if I really needed to add things that I didn't discover, this is where I do it. And you simply, there was a location that I want to add, you simply hit new. You've got the browse, pulls up a nice little picker. If you don't want to put it in manually, it lets you browse the registry hierarchy. HKey current user. I'm going to hit cancel there. We don't need to add anything. Files, you have the same option. You hit new, allows you to specify a file path, use a picker to browse to that location. We're good on this, so we're not gonna make any changes to this, but it shows and demonstrates that you have the option to do some advanced edit flows if you choose to do so. We've just run straight through. We haven't made any changes, so I'm going to go ahead and hit create here. Yep. Okay, and I'm going to save this one out to my desktop. It's going to be called design.xml. Close down our generator. So let's talk about deployment options. So the deployment options you have for settings location templates is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we look at the architecture, but settings location templates are registered with the UAV agent through WMI calls, and we also have PowerShell commandlets. So I'm going to pull up PowerShell just because WMI is a lot harder to do from command line. So
let's do PowerShell.
Let's do PowerShell. And I'm going to run it elevated here. Actually, no, I don't want to run this elevated. All right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the UAV module. It's called Microsoft.uav.commands. That imports all the tools into my session here. And I'm going to do register. And I've just got my cheat sheet here just to make sure I get it right here. Register-UAV template. And then I'm going to call the path. To my desktop. And it's going to be design.xml. Oops, access denied. I did need that elevated. Let me run this one more time here.
Yes.
Hey, Jay should have caught me on that one.
I thought you were you found a magic way to do it without.
Okay. We're going to import our module again here. And we're going to do UAV. Register. UAV template. And I'm going to do C:, users, username, desktop, and design. And this time it registered for us.
Yes, successful.
Okay, so let's actually demonstrate that it's roaming. So I'm going to push this file out to my P drive so that I can pick it up on the other VM here.
So we applied it to client 1. Now we need to apply it to the second client so we can actually show you that it will actually roam everything back and forth here. So
now we're going to pull up client 2.
Yep.
And this one I already have the PowerShell module.
And let's go ahead, let's run this as
registered.
admin. Let's also copy it to the desktop, the actual XML file. Let's go ahead and do that real quick too. Let's just bring it down to the local machine here.
Let's see. It is Contoso DC. Why is that showing up here?
Looks like we lost the P drive. Okay. Why don't we go back to the other machine, just copy it over.
2. Copy it over. 2.
Yeah, let's go back to client 1 here, and let's just copy it over.
2.
Let's copy that, and then let's browse over to client 2 here. Just do it from client 1 real quick.
That won't work.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, just do it on client 1.
Looks like this one is not seeing our domain controller. Wait, you want to try it?
Take a quick look here. Let me take a quick peek here, see what's going on.
We won't spend too much time on this one.
Yeah, why don't we just do it this way then? Why don't we just copy this, go back. Oops, I can type here. Client 2, whack $C. There we go. Let's drop it onto your desktop here. It's easy. There we go.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and run it there, AJ?
Now we're
okay.
cooking. Now we're cooking with gas. Now we're cooking with gas here.
Okay.
All right.
Template over here. Sorry about the hiccup. So I'm going to go ahead and do my register UEV template. C, users, user, desktop, and design.xml. Oops.
We do the rigid module. We need to do the module.
Module. Microsoft, UV commands. And run that one again. And there it's registered.
All right. So
okay.
Let's go back to client 1 now.
And we're going to go ahead and run design.
Yeah.
Right away you can see design comes up. Yep. And I'm going to go ahead and just make a quick change here. We'll collapse this guy here.
Let's, before you log out here, or before you close out of this here, let's also log out of client 2 because we need that P drive back. Because remember,
let's see if that P drive comes up.
Yeah, so behind the scenes, obviously, the settings package is being written to the P drive. So on this client 2, for some reason, since our P drive's disappeared, we need to get that back. So why don't we just log back in real quick and see if it just remaps.
Make sure we get it,
here.
otherwise we'll just move on here.
Yeah.
And maybe that domain controller's gone missing. Let's see what we got. It's back.
All right,
good
there
job.
we go. So now let's go back to client 1.
Okay.
Let's close out of this. Or
go ahead and
let's make some more changes.
Make a quick change here. I'm going to change it to a light.
Yep.
And then we're going to close this. It's our trigger.
Yep.
Save that out to the central store, which is now available on our second machine here. Mm-hmm. And we'll go to expression design. And we'll run this, which hasn't been run before. And there it comes up. Workspace is gone. It's with the light theme. And there you have it stated how to create a template in the end, deploy it, and have it roam for users.
So there we go.
Okay. Switch back over here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the advanced functions. So we talked about, I showed you the generator, some of the things you saw in the wizard, how you can add and edit. I showed you the XML as well. Here are some functions that you can read about in the XML schema for UEV. But they're not available, their advanced options not available yet in the generators. So you'd want to read up on these and edit the XML manually if there's things you would want to add from here. So I'll just go through them quickly here. The first one is registry and file exclusion. So if you want to actually exclude files instead of including them, there's a provision to do so. The second one is suited application and common setting support, meaning if you have applications, different applications that share settings, there are provisions to make sure that the triggers and everything work in conjunction. An example of that would be Office, where they share some settings. Adobe Creative Suite, I'm sure you can have other examples. There are provisions to do that that are not available through the generator. The next is multiple processes are executables. So if you have an application that has multiple executables, but they share the same group of settings, there are provisions to add more than one executable to a settings location template so it can target all of them together. Spanning versions. So you notice that in my example of Adobe Reader, I spanned from version 10.0 to 10.1. You can span, in your advanced edit, you can span up to the 4 levels, major, minor, build, etc. And if you have verified that settings will roam appropriately between versions, you can span and make sure that you don't have to create separate new packages for users because a new version came out. Next is architecture separation. So if you find that there's an application where the 64-bit versions of setting are not compatible with x86 or vice versa, there's a way that you can provision, have one template for both the x86 and x64 version, but separate them into separate packages so that the user doesn't have issues if they happen to be accessing different bitnesses of the application on different systems. And then finally, for file and registry paths, you saw the environment variables. That's a common way that we use it in the generator that supports it. You can also use known folders, the 13 that are set up standard, or if you set up custom ones, you can set those as for paths. And you can also point to registry values to actually complete paths. So there are an overview of some of the advanced functions of XML. Again, you can read up with the XML schema that ships in beta.
So another thing we've heard that you guys kind of run into is you get this phone call from an end user that says, I don't know what I've done, but this toolbar is moved, or I just messed up my application. I have no idea what to do, right? Or maybe I'll take Britton, for example. If he's working at home, sitting on his couch, plugging away, and he sets his laptop down on the coffee table to go get a drink, and then his 4-year-old comes up to the laptop and goes, oh, it's Dad's machine. Let me play with it. He goes back, and it's like, what just happened? What do I do? And Britton's a smart guy. He can try to fix some of it. But what do most end users do? They call the help desk. They go, my application's messed up. Can you get it back to the way I actually had it looking before, right? And usually IT will go, well, let me see if I can do this. But realistically, what do? They take the profile, they delete it, and you've lost everything, right? You've lost the customization for the OS and every single application on that machine. So what UEV actually does is it allows us to say, you know what? If one application has a problem because you've changed a setting inadvertently, we can roll that back to its actual known state from when UEV actually first saw it. So we can roll it back to that initial state when UEV saw it and get that application back up and running for you. It's also good, let's say you make a change to an application where you point the SQL database for this application to another server accidentally. And then now the app no longer works. The user doesn't know what happened. We can roll that back to a good state so the application would actually launch properly. Okay. So yeah, we can actually do we want to do rollback real quick? Do we have some time?
I think maybe we have a little bit of time.
Yeah, why don't we actually show you what the rollback experience looks like quick.
This is a pretty easy thing to set up. Okay, so we're back over onto client machine 1 here. And let's go ahead and demonstrate Adobe Reader. We ran that and show how that roamed.
Yep.
This is the MSI version, but you similarly can do rollback for app V.
Yep.
We'll just show it for our MSI here. So again, I'm going to pull up PowerShell. Move that. Run as administrator. And I'm going to import our module. Microsoft UEV commands. Okay.
It's, remember, it's restore UEV user
Yep.
settings, right?
So I'm going to run the command, restore UEV user settings. And I'm going to use the flag to just call the application name. That's spelled right. And this one is going to be Adobe Reader. Oh, sorry,
it's
Adobe
Acrobat Reader.
Acrobat Reader 10. It asks me if I really want to commit this change, and I do. And there my settings are rolled back. We'll go ahead and verify that. Run our MSI version of Adobe Reader. You saw the splash screen came up. It's asking me for the EULA again. It's gone back to that initial state. And let's jump back over to the demo here. I'm sorry, to the deck. And let's take a look at the architecture. We'll talk about that known package state here in a moment. So here's our Windows instance. We talk about how an important part of UEV is the fact that you target applications, just those applications that you want to target for your organization, and not the entire user profile. In this case, we have Word and we have Zune. We want to target Word. We want to leave Zune alone, and that's why we have it illustrated this way. We talked about how applications store settings typically in registry locations, HKey current user, and in local files, generally in app data roaming. You will deploy, and we'll talk about the deployment steps from a high level in a moment here, but you'll deploy the UEV service. And to the UEV service, you'll register your settings location templates. In this case, we have one registered for Word, so it's going to be targeting Word, not Zune. When the user then initiates Word, we will pause that application. We will inject the UEV DLL, the UEV software. First thing the software will do is it will go out to that settings package location locally. If it finds that the initial state hasn't been created, meaning it's the first time that you've run Word on this machine, it's going to go ahead and take a snapshot and save off that initial state. And that's how we keep that for rollback, like we just demonstrated.
That's how we just did Adobe, yep.
That's how we just demonstrated with Adobe. Secondarily, it will check your remote setting storage location. It will see if there's a newer package. If there's not a newer package, it's going to exit right there. It will unpause that app and let the user proceed as normal. If they find that there's a new one, it's going to import that. We talked about how we use offline files for offline users to provide low bandwidth and offline experiences. It's going to import that package to the local machine. It's going to expand those settings. It's going to then apply them before unpausing the applications. Once they're in place, unpauses, the user goes about it as normal. If during the course of using Word, you make a setting or a couple changes to your settings, then the same thing is going to happen. It's going to collect the settings. It's going to save it locally, and then it will push it out to the remote store. And that kind of in a nutshell is the architecture of how UEV works on endpoint devices.
So basically we have a service, an agent, and a remote storage location.
That's correct. Let's look at platform requirements here. This will be a boring slide. I'll move through this quickly. So we support Windows 7 and above, both the client and the server SKUs. So Windows Server 2008 R2 is also in there. Consumer Preview Windows 8 will support the final version of Windows 8 as well. I have the old name of Windows Server 8 Beta here. We know it's now called Windows Server 2012. I didn't have time to update it, but you'll see that we support both the client and server SKUs for Windows 8. The bitness column, you can see we support the bitnesses that are available for those SKUs, so we'll support all of those. We do require .NET for both the agent and generator. For Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2, it's .NET 3.5 for both of them. You'll notice for the Windows 8 server and client SKUs that for the agent, we do not require .NET 3.5. If you want to keep those clean with .NET 4, you're free to do so. However, if you need the generator, it does require 3.5. So if you're using the generator on one of your machines and you're on Windows 8, you'll have to install that .NET 3.5. But to ease deployments, where a lot of you, as you move to Windows 8, are not going to be deploying 3.5, to keep it lightweight, we do not require that for the agent. The last column then, offline files, we talked about how that's a necessity if you're going to have an offline experience. Keep in mind that it's only enabled by default in Windows 7. For all of the other SKUs, including Windows Server 2008 R2, offline files will be off by default. If you need that, you need to turn them on.
So, but now I guess some of you are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, if I'm doing this in VDI, do I need to turn on offline files, right? Because if I'm always connected to that share, why do I need the offline file experience at all? So is offline files really actually required?
No, it's not. So it's not required, especially in VDI and data center locations where you don't need it, where offline files would just get in the way. You don't want to enable it and have that on VDI, on your remote app, etc. You can turn it off. That can be done at deployment time through WMI by setting. You can set a registry key, etc.
Perfect.
And so you can turn that off.
Great.
All right. So let's talk about just a high-level view of the requirements. We'll just inventory what we've already talked about. The first one we talked about, the setting storage server. There are two ways you can do this here. Those two bullets are two ways that you can automate the deployment of your setting storage location for your user. The first, just set up a standard network share. Take the root folder, set permissions so that users can create folders and ACL them for themselves. And then you go ahead and deploy with that path hard-coded. You can use MSI exec as you deploy the agent. You can use WMI and PowerShell to actually hard-code and set those. You can use environment variables like usernames so that it will dynamically create different folders for their user based on their logged-in username. And then it will go ahead and ACL that automatically for you so that the permissions are correct for your users. That's one way. The second way is the way that we've demonstrated here in this environment, and that's just to set up Active Directory with a profile path. So we had the P drive here.
The home directory, not the profile path, the home directory.
The home directory, excuse me. So we had a home directory here, the P drive, and that will automatically create for your users without you doing anything. You just simply deploy the agent, it will auto-detect that home directory path, and it will set up a hidden folder for the user with the proper ACLs, and off they go. So two very easy ways to set up that setting storage server and automate the creation of folders with the right permission. The second thing here, UEV agent is the requirement for the machine. You can deploy that with a standard ESD. Like I talked about, we have the standard MSI exec commands, silent. You can hard code all the bootstrap configuration options and get that running immediately. CM, it will work great with that as well. We'll also have, with the final version of the product, a DCM pack to help ease that deployment and configuration of UEV. So the agent needs to be deployed. And then thirdly, you need to have your templates. We talked about one way to get the templates. It's to get them down to the endpoint devices, use the WMI or PowerShell calls to actually register them. A second option that you have that you can read more about in the beta documentation is to actually set up a catalog path that the agent checks into to keep their templates up to date. So you could set this up on a remote server, on a storage server. You could keep your templates, the latest version of those templates, at that path. The agents will check in with that catalog path and make sure to have the latest versions registered and ready to go. So it's a pull method versus a push method. We try to be flexible and versatile and allow you to do it the way it makes sense for your organization. Yep. Finally, AJ's hit this one a lot. We don't require you to do anything special to integrate with the Microsoft desktop virtualization technologies, with AppV, with Remote App, with VDI, with RD Session hosts. It's the same configuration. It's the same deployment options. It's the same settings, location templates. We make that easy and simple.
The agent does all the magic.
That's right.
So kind of in summary, we'll go a little quickly here because I know I want to give you guys plenty of time. But on the personal flexible side, you guys have seen now that users really would no longer need to reconfigure their applications, right? They can go from machine to machine and get that same application experience regardless of even how they are actually deployed, be it physical or virtual, and the same goes even for the machine. And we also focused on how do we make sure that we load the actual OS very, very quickly, so you could log in quickly compared to some of our traditional technologies you might have used in the past, and how do we sync those settings very quickly. You've noticed we just close out of the application, go to the next virtual machine, and it's there. There is no, like, I need to wait 10 minutes to make this happen. It's very, very fast. On the simple and versatile side, we provide templates for the OS, so Windows 7, Windows 8, and Office 2010 right out of the box. You can create custom templates, as you saw, pretty simply and easily using the generator. And of course, you can roll back settings to their initial state. And then, of course, from an integrated and scalable standpoint, you can seamlessly integrate with the Microsoft virtualization tools, or the solutions we already have, like AppV, RDS. You can use your existing tools to manage UEV, so you can use System Center Configuration Manager, you can use PowerShell, so you can leverage the knowledge you already have of those tools to kind of get UEV up and running. And of course, if you're using System Center Configuration Manager, we'll provide a DCM pack in the future to help make sure that the agent has a consistent configuration. So other content and sessions you might want to be aware of. The beta you can get from Microsoft.com/getuev. I've got a short overview video on TechNet, so if your boss needs to look at it, he's got like 5 minutes, point him at this video real quick. It'll give him the high-level overview. The gallery we also have available, so you can, of course, pull down templates from there and contribute your own. And then from a session standpoint, we have an instructor-led lab later on today and tomorrow morning. We also, just before this session, had a desktop virtualization overview session, so I would check out the recording if you're interested in that one. And then right after this session, or actually right after lunch, there's an App v5.0 session. So if you're interested in app virtualization, I would highly recommend you take a look at that. Last but not least, of course, please fill out your evaluations. And of course, you can review this session on the recording after the event.
Okay.
And we'll do questions.
We got questions already. This gentleman stepped up first. Why don't you go ahead?
Is storage of the settings on a NetApp appliance supported?
So specifically NetApp, there are probably some challenges with that. We recommend just a standard file server SMB available share.
Basically anything that does SMB though, right?
Basically anything that does SMB. So if you can get NetApp to function that way.
So if it does SMB and it has OpLocks functionality, it could do that?
That's right. If you can configure that to work that way, then it should be just fine.
You're fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Gentleman in the back here.
What's the behavior of the system when you have something like Outlook with its OST file?
So right now in the Office 2010 Outlook template, we don't actually include the profile path in roaming. It tends to be pretty big. There are some things that are desirable in there, but I think for the general template that ships with the product, we're not including that. Mm-hmm. If you want to take our template and modify it and add the profile or add parts of the profile, it's certainly up to you to do that and to test that. But the default template that we provide out of the box does not include the Outlook profile.
But is that going to be something you'll address? Because otherwise I could see, for example, if you go from a laptop to a virtual desktop environment and they fire up Outlook, it's either going to sit there saying, this is the first time you've used it, I've got to cache your mailbox, or you've got to pull over your multi-gig.
Yeah. But I'd also say that the Outlook, the OST file can also be hundreds of megs, if not gigabytes.
Yeah.
And if you want to roam that between machines, you're going to have to...
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So it can handle that amount of data, as long as your storage server can handle those big files, as long as your users are patient, if they're actually roaming frequently between machines. Obviously, it has to wait for that to buffer to the storage server and then buffer down to the machine. We do have some background downloading that helps ease that. But provided that works for your organization, you can certainly add the profile. It will certainly work if you choose to do that, knowing what the limitations might be. And I think for general use, what we provide out of the box, we probably want to include the profile. However, we're taking feedback in beta. This is not the first time we heard the feedback on Outlook profile, so we're going to keep looking at that and refining all of our Office templates to make sure they're perfect as we launch in the final version.
Okay,
thanks for your feedback.
This gentleman over here, up front here.
Next.
Yeah, it's also working for Citrix, XenApp, and
for Citrix,
presentation. Yeah.
For XenApp, for ThinApp, and VMware, we are architected specifically to be okay in those environments. We are going to test and make sure, for the best of our knowledge, we work well with that.
Yeah. But we would probably rely on Citrix, of course, to verify with their stuff, right? They know their product better than we do, so we would say, Citrix, obviously they have access to the beta and everything else. if they came back and said, hey, we're trying in our environment, could you help us out and figure out if there's a way to make, if there's a problem, we would work with them directly.
That's right.
So.
But we're architected at a layer that should work with most application virtualization technologies, including Citrix and VMware. Yep. Great.
So what happens with the open dialog? So stuff that's not an application. This is just Windows. Maybe I missed it somewhere. So in that dialog, you can also customize favorites. And when you go to open a file, which you did actually in your demo, what happens with that dialog? Because it's not an app setting, it's a window.
The actual open browser section,
open a file.
Open file browser, the picker, that's actually part of Windows Explorer. In beta, we did not ship a template for Windows Explorer. We're trying to get that one added to the final version of the product. If we do, then there are settings. The settings that you would go to, tools and options in File Explorer, would actually roam, and you get those settings customization. So that's actually part of the Windows shell. And we're working on having a template available for that
favorites,
one.
I'm assuming, things like that.
Favorites actually supported. So we talked about support for IE 9 and IE 10. We're considering adding support for IE 8 as well. We know some of our customers are still on IE 8 for various reasons. And that is it will roam favorites, and it'll roam the settings in the browser as well. And that's done on open and close, just like the other applications. We could demonstrate it here. It's just you save a bookmark, you close IE. It's going to roam to your second machine with that bookmark and any options that you have for IE specifically.
Okay, one more question about rollback. So we don't usually go back. So in a large organization, we actually have some default profile kind of things.
Yep.
Is there any plans to support something where it's not just going back to a blank install, but we've customized it somewhat?
So you'll probably be talking about maybe having the defaults for your organization. In this version, it's not a supported scenario. It's something that we're considering long-term as we take feedback from customers, especially in beta, but it's currently not supported in the product. But defaults is something we're hearing feedback on, and we'll consider that.
And the rollback is to the state that you first saw it. So if the application's already pre-configured, but you've deployed it out with whatever configuration you have for your organization, it'll roll it back to the first time UEV saw it. In our case, when we showed Adobe, it was first run. So if you've already kind of bypassed some of that or configured portions of it so that it's already done, you don't see the same thing.
That's correct. If you use group policy preferences and you configure it off, or you use the deployment toolkit or group policy preferences for another app, and that's already been deployed to the machine, that first snapshot is going to take your preferences. And when you do that rollback, it's going to be from that state. Gentleman in the back here.
Yeah, can the storage share be replicated through DFSR? Or?
It can, yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Yep. So you can use standard Microsoft technologies to do that, correct?
Importing the template on the machine using PowerShell, that's for beta, right? Or is that your anticipation that we would do that?
So WMI is actually the main way it's done. The PowerShell just wraps the WMI calls. So that was the one method to do it, is through WMI or with PowerShell. The second method, you heard about the catalog path. Did you catch that in my second to last slide there?
No.
So let me explain that. So the first method, like I said, is a push method, where you push your templates to the endpoint device and you register them, and you script it essentially using WMI calls or PowerShell to register them to the agent. The second option allows you to actually have a template storage path. So you configure the agent to refer to a remote store where you have a catalog of your templates that should be configured. It's going to check in frequently with that, keep it in sync. So that's kind of the pull method. Yeah, so those are the two methods we're supporting in beta.
It's a different share than where the user settings are stored. So you just have another network share that's a folder where you just put all your templates in. And then the agent checks on a regular basis through a scheduled task and says, is there anything new in there? Yes? Great. Register that
Or anything
stuff.
to remove. It's going to reconcile those for you periodically. So however it's whatever's best for your organization.
The idea is that it's kind of an all or nothing thing, though, right? So if you would, there's no segmentation then for one group of users that you want their word to roam, and other groups of users where you don't.
So you can have multiple template storage locations. So if you have a department, say accounting, that needs different ones than, say, the engineering or R&D department needs, you just set up different repositories.
Okay, and those settings are all per machine, right?
And those settings are all per machine or per user.
Okay.
It's going to check in the registry first for user-specific settings. If it doesn't find any user-specific settings, and it falls back to machine. So you can certainly set up multiple catalog storage locations depending on how you run your organization. Okay.
All right, some questions in the back. Oh,
Questions in the back.
So a couple of questions here. So if there are any shared templates, would you have any UI where somebody posts a shared template on TechNet, then somebody imports it and is able to customize it and then use it then? Or are shared templates like you have to use them as is?
No, when you download those templates from the gallery, it's just going to be an XML file, just like you saw me create for design. You can take that, you can import that, you can put it in the generator, edit to heart's content, you can pull up the XML in an editor, add what you want. So they're not going to come down as binaries, they come down as XML.
Yeah, I'm hoping something more enhanced than an XML. I mean, of course, somebody can deep dive and modify the XML, but would there be UI like the generator?
Generator, yes. So you saw there were 3 flows in the generator, one to create a brand new one.
Right.
That's the one I demonstrated. The second option allows you to import an existing template, maybe one you've downloaded from the gallery, maybe one your colleague's done in your department, but you can import those and you can go through that same rich experience that you saw me demonstrate for a new template with one you got from the gallery or from a colleague, for example.
Okay, perfect. The other one was slightly more technical. So when an app launches, you say you pause it and then you kind of refresh the settings.
Yes.
Do you refresh everything or do you know what was applied last and you apply a diff?
We know what's been applied last. So I mentioned that the first thing we do when the application starts, we pause after our software has been injected. We refer to the local store. If there's nothing new remote, then we stop there, and the application loads with nothing. If there is a new package, we import that package, we expand it, and we apply only the things that have changed.
Okay, so you would do a diff against what's on the machine and apply just those. So if only 3 settings are modified, only 3 of those.
That's correct. But we'll import the package, we'll import the whole package and have that available on this. But when we apply it, we'll just apply what's changed. Great question. Sir?
Yeah. I guess along similar lines, I'm wondering about how paranoid you guys are being about protecting the data. So I can see that in the process of uploading, especially if you're doing files, right, that if you're interrupted midstream, start somewhere else, right, you can end up in a sort of a sync conflict. So do you actually try to make it somewhat transactional, like you don't commit it until, okay.
That's a great question. Transactional as far as making sure that there's not corruption. That is not a feature that's going to be available in beta. It's going to be available in the final version of the product. We're developing it right now. It's something that we'll have available so that if you begin a transfer, we're not touching your state until that transfer is done and we verified that it's complete, and then we go ahead and apply it. So we're going to have transactional application and download to make sure that those occurrences don't happen. Okay, and if we don't have a complete one, we don't apply those settings and we wait till the next time to make that happen.
Okay, and I mean, similarly, let's say you have the goofy state where you don't have the network connection when you first started up the application, so you get some random set of defaults. When you quit that application, is that set of random defaults that application loaded because it couldn't load the original store going to get saved back as the settings that you wanted?
So the settings packages, the way that our sync works, it's last writer wins. So it depends which was the last application, or on which system was the last application to close. It's going to write out and override whatever was on the server. So I think in that instance, depending on the timing, there is the possibility that the undesirable results, you didn't get the import. If you didn't get the import, then we're not going to do an export, first of all. But if there is a situation where you close the application with settings that you maybe didn't want and it writes out to the settings storage, and you have no other applications open, it could overwrite those packages. So
okay, but what you're saying is that if the CIF store that has the settings is unavailable when you start the application or log in, when you exit that application or log out,
it won't write them out.
It won't write them out because it knows that it couldn't import that in.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, cool.
Good question. Which one's first?
I'll take the gentleman up front, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, you indicated that there is support for ThinApp. Is there anything special that has to take place for that?
As far as we know at this point, no. There should be nothing special that takes place. We're architected at a level in the kernel where that should just work.
But we're not specifically testing ThinApp. It's neutral at this point.
We have a TAP customer that is using ThinApp, and we're doing some testing there. We also want to get feedback from beta. If we hear that there are issues, we'll certainly look into it.
Okay, so and when are you targeting general availability?
In a future version of MDOP.
Yeah, no exact date yet.
Yeah.
So
I've been trained very well on that.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Sir in the back.
I had a question about Internet Explorer and AppV web apps. So if we had a couple of web apps that are essentially have an overlay of Internet Explorer settings, does that pose a problem with UEV and managing those two unique type of configurations in AppV when you still have just the one local IE instance?
You know what? I'm not completely familiar with AppV web apps. I would need to look into this one. Would you come up after the session? I'm going to give you my card, and I'm going to follow up with you. If anyone else has questions, wants to answer the same question as well, send me an email. Our alias is available. I'm Briz at Microsoft, BRIZ. I'll get you an answer directly, and if anyone else wants an answer to that one as well, go ahead and email me. Just come up and I'll give you my card.
Nice question.
Also on an AppV topic, which takes precedence or priority in terms of loading the UAV settings and applying settings injected through the OSD for AppV?
When you talk about OSD?
So we have reg keys in a lot of our OSDs that are applied at launch or pre-launch for the virtual application. Would those be overwritten by settings in the UEV, or would they take...
Yeah, I'm kind of unclear on the scenario. I don't know if I can answer that off the cuff here without getting a little more information on your scenario. If you'd like, maybe you could write it down for me. I'll give you my card as well.
I'm with Ira, so...
Okay, great. So I got 2 questions to answer for you guys. That's great. I'll get a little more context from you. Maybe you could put it in writing, and I'll work with our sister team, the AppV guys, and make sure I get the right response for you. I don't want to go ahead and say the wrong thing. Okay. Great question, though. One more question here in the back, and others too. Go ahead and stay if you'd like. Go ahead.
When you guys are leveraging the settings in AppV, in an AppV application, you have a natively installed application that's, so for example, Word, and you have an AppV version of Word and a local version of Word. I guess the question that's going to come up from my customers is, I thought we had isolation in the registry and file perspective in AppV.
Yes.
How is UEV going around and understanding where...
That's a great question. So are you talking about a scenario where I have deployed Word 2010 MSI on an endpoint device, and on that same endpoint device, I also have an AppV, either 4.6 or 5.0 version of Word? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. And so when you look at those settings, you're supposed to have isolation.
Yeah. Is that a common scenario, by the way? Is that a scenario that you see very often?
It's going to depend on as we move towards Windows 7 deploy, what our customers are going to leverage in terms of 64-bit versus 32-bit based on plugins.
Okay.
So it's a question I see.
Okay, so let me address this one. So that sounds familiar, where you may have a 32-bit version of MSI Word and a 64-bit version of AppV Word.
Because those would be 2 separate UE.
In that case, we talked about the ability to separate settings packages for 32-bit version versus 64-bit versions. In that case, they'd be isolated.
Right.
So you would load up 64-bit version of AppV Word. It would have its own settings package versus the 32-bit version. In that scenario, we support it. If you do have a scenario which we think is pretty uncommon, where you have the same bitness and the same version of Office or Word between MSI and AppV, they're going to conflict. You're probably going to have some undesirable results, and that's not a scenario that we would support.
All right. And so when you look at, and so just to sort of go up just a little bit more, so to my customers, AppV is, I have a virtual registry, I have a virtual file system.
Yes.
Right? How is it that in the actual template creator that we're able to say to ourselves, well, how can we create a single template that's going to allow for it to know that these are what the settings are, regardless whether it's AppV or it's a natively installed app? Because they're supposed to be truly isolated inside AppV, right?
Yeah. So
I see that it works, but I want to know how it works, and if
so just
I
to
give
you
offline with AJ.
A high-level view of that is because we wanted to be architected in the layer that wouldn't matter whether we were in a virtual registry or in a physical registry. We wanted to support all virtual application types. We wanted to support AppV without having anything specialized. Our DLL, the agent software, when it's actually injected into the process, it doesn't know whether it's virtual or whether it's native. It's simply going to write to the registry, pull from the registry that's available to it. So there's not really a good way, I don't believe, to determine whether or not, in a template, whether or not you're targeting an AppV app or you're targeting an MSI app. And again, that was a trade-off. Just like we talked about, we want to be able to have one configuration that supports all of these different deliveries. And that was just a trade-off, I think, that we made to say we want to be agnostic. We don't really care whether we're injected into an AppV or thin app version of Word or an MSI version. We just want to work. We don't want to have multiple templates for those. It's kind of a design choice that we made. I'd love to hear your feedback on why maybe that's the wrong choice, and maybe there's a feature
I'll set up some time.
Come up and get a card, and I'll give that to you as well. Let's talk more about this because it sounds pretty compelling. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Gentleman on the back left.
So are you actively testing against high latency networks? So like if I have a 300 millisecond round trip to the file server, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things to make it work better than when we accidentally did that with roaming profiles. Is that a test scenario that this is going to work?
It is, but the technology we're using is already really well tested in those scenarios, and that's offline files and client-side cache. So what you get in those scenarios, like we talked about, low latency, low bandwidth, that's handled by our partner technology, client-side cache and offline files. So we don't have anything inherent to our product because we use those products. We inherit all the testing and all the experience over the years of client-side cache and Roman user profiles, and those scenarios are handled pretty well. We have some low bandwidth, low latency testing that we do just for sanity checking, but for the majority of that type of usage, that's handled by the Windows client team through just normal client-side cache testing.
Okay, thanks.
Migration strategy from existing profiles to this new thing?
So roaming user profile migration, that's a great question. I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier here. We're currently testing what it's like to coexist. We would never recommend it. We want to make sure that it doesn't break it, but our recommendation at this time in beta is if you are using roaming user profiles in your organization and you deem UEV to be a replacement for you, again, we're not going to cover all of the scenarios like default settings, like mandatory profiles, etc. But if for a portion of your users or your entire organization you can just drop and replace with UEV, and some of our customers will be able to do that, we recommend you bring the profiles local, so turn off roaming user profiles, bring them local, and then deploy UEV. That would be our recommendation. We do not recommend coexistence with RUP. Sorry, the front.
So let's repeat the question for the audio recording. So
Yeah.
if you're using local profiles, is there a way to pull in the settings and everything into UEV?
So you should, when you bring the profile from remote to local, you should get all those settings that are in the roaming user profile. Is that correct?
No. He's just local.
Oh, it's just a local profile.
Yeah.
You've never had a roaming user profile. I see. Got it. So the only way that would work is if you went through and exercised all the applications. So once you start an application, of course, it saves off that default, like you talked about. It will create that settings package on the remote store. There's not an automated way to say, hey, just snapshot everything I have templates for. Right now, you'd have to go in as the user, start an application, close it, and then would save off that local package, the initial package for all of those applications. They don't have to make changes. Yeah. The changes thing was a generator thing. When you're actually building a template, sometimes you have to exercise it. For this, no. The first time you run an application, it's going to always create that initial settings package, regardless of if you made a change or not. And that's just for safety. It keeps the backup of that in case you need to restore it.
Right. All right. I think that's
Other
all.
questions? One more question here. Go ahead, sir. So you're saying that I already have them? So that is, so I think I hope I made this clear. That we do automate that in the two use cases I talked about. The first was just setting up a hard-coded path with maybe percent username percent. No. A maintenance window. We don't have anything out of the box, but I assume in your ESD, if you're using CM or Altiris, whatever you happen to be using, you should be able to schedule and stagger the deployment of the agent. So the first time that the agent runs, that the user logs in and the agent's installed on, that's when that directory gets created. So if you just stagger the agent deployment, and you do that through your standard ESD scripts, etc., then that's what happens. It doesn't create it until the user logs in.
It's also just creating a folder. That's all it's doing, right?
Yeah, all it's doing is creating a folder, and it's going to ACLet. So yeah, I mean, but this may be a pretty wide-scale deployment, so you may want to consider that. There's nothing out of the box that we do to stagger that creation. Okay, that's time. I'm getting the call in the back. If you need a card from me, come up, and I'll